the censorship is a real problem that affects so many of us. Whether it's you guys out there trying to speak about the truth that lies in your heart, it gets taken down. Accounts get taken down. Words get shut down. This seems like such a big hurdle because it seems like there are so many big companies involved in the data, in the censorship, in the privacy, in all of these things. What is the next step for us to be able to gain our voice, to be able to uphold that First Amendment of freedom of speech?
You know, I think the very first step is making sure that universally we recognize the problem. And the reason for this being necessary and being vigilant in this regard is because they hide their censorship, as they do so many things, under the guise of, we're doing this for you. We care about you so much that we're going to protect you from any information or words or videos that may harm you, that may infect your mind with misinformation or disinformation. We're going to protect you from speech that we deem to be hate speech. We don't want you to hear anything that we think will offend you. We're doing this for your own sake. And this was where, if you remember, during the Harris-Biden administration, they came up with this genius idea called the Disinformation Governance Board. I recently re-listened to the book 1984, audiobook. And what they called the Disinformation Governance Board was the Ministry of Truth. And that's something that is so, and I see a few shirts here about protecting women's sports, something that is so obvious and clear as day to even the smallest of children, that there are biological differences between boys and girls and men and women. According to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's Ministry of Truth, that is not the case. Don't believe what your eyes are showing you. That whatever they want us to believe to be true is the truth. And this is what is so incredibly dangerous, that you have people who are in positions of power today, and they're working with the propaganda media, and they're working with big tech and social media, suppressing accounts or posts that they don't want people to see, and amplifying voices and narratives and agendas that they do want people to see, which is harming our kids, the most vulnerable amongst us. And they're doing this with this mindset that they believe that they know what's best for us more than we do. And quite frankly, that they just don't care. That they care more about their power than the well-being of our children. They care more about the power than our voices and our freedom to make up our own minds for ourselves. To see and hear information and discuss it openly in a public marketplace of ideas as we are gathered in places like this or online. They want total control. And so for people who, you know, who may not live on social media very much, or who don't watch what's going on with, you know, Matt Taibbi's release of the Twitter files exposing how the White House directed Twitter to censor people's voices who even dared to question their COVID policies. If people aren't paying attention to this, we have to cut to the core of this issue, is that we have in Kamala Harris and Tim Walz directly, and the videos are out there as the receipts, who believe that the First Amendment, our right to free speech and freedom of expression, does not apply to what they call misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech. And what they're not telling the American people is that they and they alone are the ones who dictate what that speech that must be censored is. We've been experiencing this now over the last 4 years, and it's been an eye-opening experience for so many people. I've experienced it, as you mentioned, Danica. One day after I went and did an interview warning the American people about the dangerous and costly consequences to our country if Kamala Harris were elected as president and commander-in-chief, warning the American people about how she would try to mask her insecurity and weakness by projecting strength as a commander-in-chief, using my brothers and sisters in uniform as pawns, launching a new war or dropping a bomb here or there so that she could say, you know what, I'm strong. I'm tough. One day after I issued that warning, I was added to a secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. Political retaliation at its best, which not only is meant to try to bully and intimidate people like me, but the bigger effect is that it sends a chilling message to anyone who is paying attention that if you speak out against us, if you challenge our power and our policies and our greed and ambition for more power, then you too will be punished. The core question here, Danica, is what do we do about this? Keep speaking up and speaking loudly. We defend our right to free speech by using our right to free speech and not allowing them to continue to try to force us into this culture of fear of self-censorship. We may get a few hate messages on social media, or a lot, depending on what's going on. You may get people calling you names, but in those moments where you catch yourself thinking twice, should I really say this? Should I really speak the truth? Is it worth the cost? Ask yourself that question when you think about the men and women who have sacrificed their lives so that we may live free today. What are you willing to sacrifice to defend our freedom today and for generations to come?
How satisfying was it, Tulsi, to see that clip of Kamala saying there was nobody in an active duty war zone, and then it panned around to show the guys going, well, what are we doing?
I love what Tulsi...
More on that in a minute. I'll let you speak on this, Bobby.
I love what Tulsi said, because the compassion, humanity, security for all of us is always the alibi for totalitarianism. It's always the excuse that they give us. They're helping us. And you know, we've seen in recent weeks, you can go on YouTube and see Tim Walz and Vice President Harris and Secretary of State, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, all saying the same thing. The First Amendment does not protect misinformation and disinformation. So it's the government's job to be the arbiter of what's true and not true, and not allow people, your neighbors, to put dangerous thoughts in your heads. And that the First Amendment is a privilege and not a right. And of course, the First Amendment does protect for misinformation and disinformation. The First Amendment protects truth, but it gives equal protection to lies. And that's how America is designed. We need that. And it's critical for democracy to have the free flow of information, to be able to allow dissenters, people with unpopular views, to talk, because so many times things that are regarded by lies by one generation are recognized by as the truth by the next generation. And it is that dialectic, the clash of ideas, the annealment of argument in the furnace of debate that rises the best ideas to triumph in the marketplace of ideas and give rise to policies. And, you know, the Democratic Party that I grew up with supported the Nazis walking through Skokie, Illinois in 1978, which was a neighborhood that was filled with Holocaust survivors. And it was appalling to them what the Nazis were saying. But everybody understood that we had to be willing to die for their right to say it, even if we didn't agree with it. That's what America's about. And that We can't be frightened of bad ideas. And as Louis Brandeis said, the remedy for bad speech is not censorship, it's more speech. And that's how we resolve things in the United States of America. And Tulsi, found out that she was on this list because every time she walked through an airport, she was being surveilled. There were air marshals assigned to follow her, to photograph her cell phone, to watch what she was doing, to monitor her conversations. And some of those air marshals were revolted and appalled. And they became whistleblowers. And that's the only way. And, right now, and the Democratic Party, the DNC has denied, all these leaders have denied that they were censoring Twitter and Facebook, but then Mark Zuckerberg, in front of a Senate committee 3 weeks ago, came forward and said, yeah, they made me censor political speech. We already knew this. I have an injunction against the Biden White House for censoring me. It's a federal court injunction that's been repeatedly upheld. And Judge Doty, who issued that injunction, wrote a 155-page decision detailing the efforts by the Biden administration 37 hours after taking the oath of office, swearing to uphold the Constitution of the United States, including the First Amendment. And the Biden administration opened up a portal in the White House and sent emails, which we now have, to all the social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Google, saying that they had to comply with these censorship diktats. And they opened up a portal, and they assigned the FBI to manage that portal so that they could get into any of these social media sites and remove accounts and remove individual posts. And my Instagram account, which had almost 1 million followers, was removed. And Facebook, we have the correspondence inside Facebook. Our executives of Facebook were appalled. They were saying they're making us do things that are illegal, and these are reprehensible people. This is what they were saying to each other, but they went ahead and did it anyway. And they removed my Instagram account. They couldn't find any actual misinformation in my Instagram account. In other words, not a single one of my posts had a statement that was factually inaccurate. We took great pains to make sure that everything I posted was cited and sourced to government databases or peer-reviewed publications. And Facebook pushed back on that and said it's not actually misinformation. And the White House had to coin a new word called malinformation. And malinformation is information that is factually correct, but it is nevertheless inconvenient to the government. And of course, a democracy cannot function if we don't have freedom of speech. And we know this from reading, because we grew up taking civics lessons, and we understand that. And we read George Orwell, and we read Aldous Huxley, and we read Robert Heinlein, and Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and Arthur Koestler. And we know from all of those extraordinary classic writers that totalitarian systems all over the world and throughout history have always begun with the censorship of speech. And that is the first step down the slippery slope to totalitarianism. There is no time that we look back in history and say that the people who were censoring speech are the good guys. They're always the bad guys. And we need to begin teaching our children. We need a president of the United States. If you don't understand that misinformation and disinformation is protected by the First Amendment, and you are disqualified from being president of the United States. And we need a president of the United States. We need a president of the United States who will use that office as a bully pulpit to give us all a civics lesson again and remind the American people that this is the most important right. A government that has the power to censor its critics has license for every atrocity. And we saw during COVID, in January of 2020, they began censoring the doctors. They said people who were injured, people who were differing scientists, the greatest scientists in the world, who were being censored because they were challenging government orthodoxies. And we were told, trust the experts. But the experts were not the experts. They were people who were in the government dictating to us these mandates. We saw that as soon as they realized that they could get away with censoring speech, they went after all our other rights. They went after freedom of worship. They closed every church in this country for a year with no scientific citation. They went after freedom of assembly by dictating a completely unscience-based, which they all admit now, social distancing mandates. They shut down property rights by closing 3.3 million businesses with no due process, no just compensation. They shut down jury trials. The Seventh Amendment guarantees every American a jury trial in any case or controversy exceeding $25. But they said if it's a corporation that is doing something, some kind of countermeasure for the pandemic, that no matter how negligent they are, no matter how reckless their behavior, no matter how grievous your injury, you cannot sue them. They took away the Seventh Amendment. They took away a Fourth Amendment guarantee against illegal searches and seizures with all their track and trace surveillance. So we saw the entire Bill of Rights dismantled with one exception, the Second Amendment, and that's probably because it was the Second Amendment. And we need to understand that without free speech, we do not have a democracy, and they'll take it away from us overnight. Those rules, those rights were won for us by a generation of Americans in 1776 who gave up their property, their status, their relationships, their power, their fortunes, and 20,000 of them their lives, to give us those rights. And in 1 year, our government took them all away from us. And I would tell you there are 3 rules that we should all remember. One is that when a government takes a power from us, a right from us, it will never voluntarily relinquish it. Number 2, any power the government takes from us, it will ultimately abuse to the maximum extent possible. Number 3, nobody ever complied their way out of totalitarianism. We need to resist, resist, resist. And we need a president, and right now you're seeing the rise of totalitarian systems all over the world. We saw in Brazil 2 weeks ago them ban Twitter and all these other social media sites and become a totalitarian regime. Europe is now censoring speech openly. We saw the arrest of Pablo Durov, the head of Telegram, when he landed to refuel in France. He was dragged off his airplane and put in jail because of free speech, because they didn't like what was written about the Ukraine war. We see the head of the European Commission, Thierry Breton, threatening Elon Musk that if he has a live interview on Twitter X Spaces with President Trump, the former president of the United States, the nominee of one of our 2 great political parties, that would be violating, that Musk was going to be criminally and civilly prosecuted or penalties amounting to 6% of the value of his company. And what should our government be doing about that? The Biden administration, if we really were promoting democracy around the world as we claim, instead of fighting a war in Ukraine, we should be screaming at the rooftops against these governments and threatening sanctions against them if they censor their people. Nobody in the Democratic Party or our government has spoken out against this atrocity, this calamity. And what we need is a president who will re-educate the public about our civic duty, who will reinstitute civics lessons in our classes that teach people to love the United States of America. And we need to teach our children to resist, and resist until hell freezes over, and then fight them on the ice.